Welcome back to Trauma Recovery Anonymous, the podcast. My name is Richard and I am your host. What if you were misdiagnosed? Please bear with me as I ask you this question. It doesn't work for me, the idea that you're mentally ill or you have a mental disorder. Especially for veterans out there. When you came out of high school or college and you had a calling by your country to step up and to be counted and to defend the needy. And you volunteered to go off to fight in a war, you enlisted to fight in a war. That took some clarity of mind, some sanity to put your life in danger for the sake and well-being of other people. And then when you enlisted in the army, they would have been psych-evaluated. The army don't want to give a gun to someone who will go out and kill everybody or let them anywhere near pressing a bomb and ending the world. And so they psych-evaluated you to find out if you are suitable material to be sane in a battle situation. And then they put you through all this training to see if you are strong-minded, strong-willed to handle most pressures. And you came through with flying colours. And you got your stripes and became a Marine or an Army or Air Force or Navy. But you showed quite clearly you were clinically sane, that you had everything it required, a strong will, strong mind, strong-hearted person who could handle situations. And you went off and you fought in some war, foreign or domestic, protecting the innocent, doing what needs to be done. You stood up, stepped up and you did what was required. And you suffered the horrors of war and you came back from that war, that conflict, having suffered the horrors of war. You didn't inflict yourself on other people. You were defending, you were protecting, and you suffered other people's insanity. But you weren't the insane one. You were the one with clarity of mind and sanity, trying to protect the innocent. And yet you suffered at the hands of other people's abuse, other people's dysfunctional behaviours, their insanity. And on returning home, you found you didn't fit in with your society anymore. Now you were different because you were war-torn and battle-worn. You didn't fit in with normal society. And so you felt out of it, you felt different, you felt in some way less than. Here were people who didn't go to war, who went on with their lives and became qualified at whatever profession you planned originally. Engineer, doctor, lawyer, barrister, shopkeeper, gardener, holistic practitioner, whatever it was, you hadn't got those credentials. And because you'd suffered war, it had changed you and your whole perspective of life had changed. Your attitude, your outlook had changed. Didn't make you insane, clinically insane or mad. It's just the fact that because of your experiences, you didn't look at life differently. You didn't look at life the same way as normal people look at life. But you did your best. And you tried to fit back in with normal life, but you didn't fit in. You found you were very comfortable around your own band of brothers, those who had walked the path you walked, then fitting back in with your family. The sad truth was your family of origin was no longer your tribe. Your tribe were warriors, and your band of your family you came from were no longer your tribe. You were different. They weren't bad and you weren't bad, just you were different because you'd experienced conflict. You were a different person. And so it was very hard to fit back in with your family of origin, your community of origin. You were like a square peg in a round hole. Didn't make you clinically ill or mentally ill. It just meant you were different. Your life experiences had changed you and you could no longer fit into the old mold that you were before. And of course, trying to fit in caused you all sorts of problems. And then the memory of what you went through would have brought back nightmares and flashbacks. And all of this would have distorted your ability to be a part of your old tribe. And so you went in search of answers, finding some solution. And it's like a shoe salesman. If you go to a shoe salesman, all he can sell you are shoes. That's his purvey, to sell shoes. You go to a mental health professional, all they can offer you are mental health solutions. Therapy, medication, diagnosis, etc. That's all they can offer you. Thought therapy. That's all they can offer you is anything to do with the mental health industry. That's all they offer. But you suffered a past trauma, a conflict in the past, that's affected your soul. It's almost destroyed your any chance of hope for a normal way of life ever again. It's changed you on the inside. People can't see this change on the outside. They can see how it manifests in your life, but they can't see inside of you, into your very soul, how this has broken your spirit, wounded your soul, how this has robbed you of your idea of what it is to be a human being, when you've seen what one human can do to another. This has all changed you on the inside. But the inside is the problem, not the outside. How it manifests in your lives with nightmares and flashbacks, or stinking thinking, or faulty feelings, or anger or rage, they're just the effects of the trauma. How the trauma affects you is the response, but the cause is you're carrying the memory and the baggage of the past. The memory is yours to carry. You're meant to carry all the memories of everything that happened to you in your past, but the baggage and details of the event is not yours. It didn't happen to you. It happened to your inner child. So if you're a veteran today in the 60s, understand that the young 18, 19-year-old version of you who enlisted to go off to fight in the war, that's their baggage, their details, what they went through. You're the survivor today looking back at what happened to them, the victim. They were the victim, you're the survivor. If you're the survivor, you can't be the victim as well. You're here alive today in this moment listening to my voice. And please God, my message is getting through to you, and you're coming to realize that you exist only in this 1 hour here and now. Your whole life, your whole meaning, your whole purpose to life is to be found in this 1 hour right now. You can't go back and change what happened an hour and a half ago, or yesterday, or last week, any more than you can change what happened to that young 18, 19-year-old version of you who enlisted. Excuse me. They suffered the trauma. They went through the trauma. They suffered all that, not you. You're here today, survivor, looking back, remembering what happened to your inner child. But even more than that, how can you diagnose that inner child as being mentally ill or having a mental disorder when they weren't the perpetrator of the actions? Someone did the trauma to them. So they suffered at the hands of what another human being could do to another human being. They saw the horrors of war, what happened around them. They were attacked. They saw their friends dying in front of them. That happened to them, to their friends. They weren't the one who did it. So they can't be the one who's mentally ill. That just doesn't make any sense. If someone does something to someone, one is the victim and one is the perpetrator. You were the victim in those days of that event. Today you're a survivor of what happened to that inner child of yours who suffered the event. You weren't the perpetrator of the event. This is a real mute point that has to be addressed. If you were the victim of the trauma, then you weren't the perpetrator. And if you weren't the perpetrator, then you weren't mentally ill. You're the victim of someone else's mental illness, of someone else's mental disorder. So for a mental health professional to diagnose you as having a mental illness or having a mental disorder because you're the victim is utter insanity. But understand, the mental health professional is trying to give you a solution to your situation. When you go to see a mental health professional, you're going there and you're trying to describe to them the worst case scenario of your condition. The same way if you had a sore tooth and you went to a dentist, and the day you went to see the dentist, your tooth wasn't sore, you wouldn't go home or say everything's fine. You'd try to describe to your dentist how bad it can get. And then they'd look for the problem, they'd have an x-ray, whatever, and they'd say, yeah, no, you have this thing here, a trapped nerve or whatever, and they'd work on it. The same for a mental health professional. When you go to a mental health professional, you're not saying, no, I feel okay today, I'm fine, or I know it's okay, it's a spiritual thing. You're telling them exactly what's wrong and how bad it can get. And in that 20 minutes of meeting you, they're striving to give you a solution to your problem. They're trying to come up with something that they have. Since you've come to them, they're trying to give you something from their bag of tricks to deal with your problem. And so you describe the effects of the trauma, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the anger, the rage, the frustration, the remorse, the guilt, the suicidal thoughts. You're trying to describe the worst case scenario of how bad it can be. This isn't your everyday state of being. Most days you're able to handle life. You can be triggered occasionally at night. You can have nightmares at night time. But you're generally speaking, you're able to manage life. But when you go to your mental health professional, you're going to tell them exactly how bad it can get. You're going to describe in the extremity how bad it can get. You want them to know how bad it can get, so you can understand on a bad day it can be this. But you're not saying it's a bad day every single day. You're not saying you're mentally ill or you have a mental disorder. You're saying on my worst day, my worst experience of this memory can be X, Y, and Z. But you're not X, Y, and Z all the time. You're just describing to them in that moment so they can help you how bad it can get. But they can only diagnose you based on what you've told them. And if you've given them the worst case scenario at your lowest, and they're meant to diagnose you based on that, they're going to diagnose you with something that will fit their bag of tricks. And since they only deal with mental illness and mental disorders, they'll either tell you you're mentally ill or you have a mental disorder. That's all they can do for you. They can't tell you you have a spiritual problem, you have an emotional problem. They will tell you you have a mental illness or a mental disorder. But that's making that decision about you in a 20-minute period of the first time you met. All of your life, not just the war, but before that, everything to do with your whole life is summed up in this one expression of you at your lowest, and that decides who you are. And so they tell you, yes, I believe you have a mental disorder called PTSD, and I think you're in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, and there's a treatment for this, and I'm going to put you on this treatment, and it's this set of medication and therapy and whatever. And you, in your desire for a solution, willing to try whatever it is, you say, yes, sir. And you take on this medication and this diagnosis, and you go off thinking, now I'll get some peace. And like taking that first medication, it's like taking your first drink of alcohol. It affects the brain and it dampens and suppresses your feelings, and you suddenly feel this release. But that's just you dampening your mood, you're quelling your brain. You don't feel anything. It doesn't change the fact that you have this past trauma memory eating away at you. Every time you take any drug, any alcohol, any medication, it will dampen or suppress your feelings. But that doesn't change the fact that you are walking around with something that's eating away at you. You're not mentally ill. You've been psych-evaluated in the army, so there's no way you're mentally ill. You're the victim back in the day. Today you're a survivor. But you're not the perpetrator. So you're not mentally ill or have a mental disorder. And that diagnosis is wrong for that very reason. The mental health industry in a recent study admitted that 39% of all people diagnosed were misdiagnosed. That's 4 in every 10 people. I think that number is very, very low. I think for a mental health professional to diagnose you within 20 minutes of meeting you and telling you have a diagnosis that's a mental disorder is insane. I think that is absolutely crazy. You were the victim, today you're a survivor. You can't be the perpetrator as well. That just doesn't make any sense. And so if you're not the perpetrator, then you're not mentally ill. You don't have a mental disorder. You went away to fight the good fight to protect the innocent. You didn't go away with the intention of murdering and maiming and changing the world and destroying the world. You weren't mentally ill. You didn't have a mental disorder. But mental health professionals can only offer you the solution of mental illness, mental disorder, therapy, medication, and talk therapy. That's all they can offer you. They can't offer you anything else because that's their purview. But I believe you don't have a mental disorder. I believe you have a spiritual illness. You have a hole in your soul, a broken spirit, a wounded soul. You're carrying the memory of what happened to your inner child, that young 18 or 19-year-old version of you who went off to fight in the war. And you're carrying sympathy pains for what they went through as a show of support and solidarity for what they went through. But the sympathy pains aren't the event. You can suffer the sympathy pains, but you're not suffering the event. You're suffering what happened to your inner child, but not what happened to you, because you only exist in this hour, here and now, listening to my voice. This is where your whole meaning in life is to be found, is in the present moment. You have to find a way of breaking free of the past, of giving the past back to your inner child and letting them take the details and baggage of that event out of this consciousness. I suggest to clients, close your eyes, breathe into your nose only, and relax your body. In this moment, visualize that younger aspect of you, that 18 or 19-year-old younger version of you who went off to fight in the war. See them enlisted in their uniform. They've gone through all the tests and they've come out and they've earned their stripes, and see them facing you. And imagine what they're saying to you today. My experience was I was sat in front of the 12-year-old child in my past who suffered a trauma. And he looked at me and he said, "Richard, what the hell are you doing? I suffered, endured, survived and overcame that trauma. So you'll be free today to have a life beyond my wildest dreams." I never asked, wanted, or needed you to fight my battles for me or to suffer my pain for me. When you took on my pain and brought it into your present, you volunteered to be a second victim for that trauma that I had overcome. By bringing the death, decay, and disease of that dead thing into your present, you allowed that death, decay, and disease to destroy everything and everyone it touched. It didn't happen to you. It's none of your business. It happened to me. And I want to step into the light and cross over into the mansion prepared for us in our Father's mansion. But I can't go until I have all the details and baggage of my trauma. And so I need you to return all of that to me. I thank you for trying to be of help, but you're more of a problem than you are of a help. You've become my abuser, and you're self-sabotaging your life in the present. My past has no place in your present. And as these voice was spoken to me, the truth of it rang true. I could quite clearly see the truth was telling me the past is not mine. Even what happened an hour ago is no longer mine. My whole life centers solely on this 1 hour now. And I have to ask myself, am I speaking slowly and clearly? And I'm speaking with clarity enough that you might hear this message, and this message might set you free. The past is none of our business. What happened to our inner child, or any of our inner children going back from the day we were born up until an hour ago, is none of our business in this 1 hour. I have to let go of the past completely, not think about the future, and focus only on this 1 hour here and now. What can I do in this 1 hour to make me a part of life? Well, I can strive to speak slowly and clearly. I can plead with you to share this with the 1 billion people in the world diagnosed with mental disorders, the 300 million children misdiagnosed with mental disorders. To understand that your feelings and emotions are your God-given instincts to be trusted, that when you feel sad or angry or annoyed about the past, you're not mentally ill. That's a normal response to life. When you feel worried or fearful of the future, that's not anxiety, that's not a mental disorder. That's a perfectly normal response for any human being. Trust your feelings. They're there to keep you safe. If you feel stressed about the past, you don't have a mental disorder called post-traumatic stress disorder. You're just stressed about the past. Honor that, admit that, and then find a solution. If you're sad or angry about the past, you don't have post-traumatic stress or depression about the past. You're just sad or angry about the past, and now look for a solution. What can I do to change my perspective, my attitude to life? Today there's a program called Trauma Recovery Anonymous, and it completes this whole process for you in 3 hours. In the first 2 hours of this process, you give the details and the baggage of the event back to your inner child. So right now, if you're a veteran, you're 60 years of age, look back and see that 18-year-old version of you looking at you, waving at you saying, "Richard, what the hell are you doing? Let me go." And let him have that conversation where he tells you, "I want to leave. I want to take my baggage with me so I can go." And this is your truth that will set you free. When you allow your inner child to leave with their details and their baggage, suddenly you find yourself completely healed, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The details will be gone. Your therapist asks you about the past and how it makes you feel. You kind of go, "I know that young fella's left the building. He's stepped into the light. He's gone. I'm free of him today, and I'm going to focus on my life in the present." And then the second part is the 12-step program of Trauma Recovery Anonymous, where you undo this learned dysfunctional behavior of what I believe is your misdiagnosis. You were never mentally ill. You never had a mental disorder. You were judged based on the effect and not the cause. Only you can make this decision for you. But understand, it's quite possible you were misdiagnosed. And you need to ask yourself that question. If you've been in therapy for more than 1 year, have worked with more than one therapist, you're on multiple medications, and the only thing that's changing is that your diagnosis is evolving. You're going from PTSD to complex PTSD, or from depression to acute bipolar depression. Understand, you may have been misdiagnosed. I can't make this call for you. You have to speak to your therapist. You have to find out for yourself, am I being treated for the cause, or am I being treated for the effect? Am I healing, or am I staying in the place, in the problem? You have to make this decision for you. Only you can do this. If you want some help doing this, you can buy these books on the Amazon platform and then send me an email at appointments@traumarecoveryanonymous.com, and I'll take you through the process. At present, I charge €60 for this 3-hour event. It will be going up to €90. But if you'd like to contact me, I'll take you through the process. I can take one person or 100 people. We use the same mantra for each person. Up until this morning, I've been carrying the memory of what happened to, in my case, little 12-year-old Richard. For you, it might be little young 19-year-old Richard, and sympathy pains for him is a show of support and solidarity for what he went through. And that's the mantra we use. So we can all do the same process at the same time, and on your screen you're declaring what your mantra is. On my screen I'm declaring what my mantra is. But then we do the healing event, and at the end of 3 hours you're free completely of the past. Only you can do this. Nobody can do this for you. I can show you how, but it has to be you making the decision to decide, is it possible I was misdiagnosed? Is it possible I'm not mentally ill, but the person who caused my trauma was the one who's mentally ill? Is it possible that I was a victim in the past, but today I'm a survivor? Two separate people, and I'm not meant to suffer the victimhood of my inner child. Today, when I'm a survivor today, I'm meant to rise out of the ashes like a phoenix. These are decisions that only you can come to by asking yourself these questions yourself. Thank you.